Tantric sexuality is one of the most misunderstood subjects in modern culture. Most people hear the word Tantra and immediately imagine exotic sex techniques, prolonged pleasure, or some sort of mystical, erotic performance. But that is only the outer shell, and often not even an accurate one. At its deepest level, tantric sexuality is not really about sex in the ordinary sense at all. It is about consciousness. It is about the attempt to transform desire from something impulsive, restless, and consuming into something sacred, attentive, and spiritually meaningful. The old tantric traditions of India did not begin with the idea of pleasure for pleasure's sake. They began with a very different metaphysical vision. In that vision, reality itself was seen as the union of two great principles, Shiva and Shakti. Shiva represented pure consciousness, stillness, awareness, the silent witnessing presence. Shakti represented energy, movement, creativity, life force, manifestation, and power. The universe existed through their relationship, and human sexuality, in its highest symbolic form, was understood as a reflection of that cosmic union. This is why Tantra has fascinated people for so long. It takes something most civilizations either fear, commercialize, or trivialize, and says, no, this too can become a path. Not because desire is automatically holy, but because desire is powerful. And power, when purified and disciplined, can be turned upward rather than merely spent. In ordinary sexual culture, arousal usually moves toward a quick climax, a discharge, and a kind of collapse. The aim is release. The logic is instinctive. But tantric sexuality introduces a different possibility. Instead of rushing to the end, one becomes present to the energy itself. Breath slows, awareness deepens. The body is not used merely as an instrument of gratification, but entered like a field of consciousness. The act is no longer only about sensation. It becomes about presence, connection, attunement, and the ability to remain awake with an intensity. That is one of the great themes of Tantra. Not suppression, not indulgence, but transformation. Classical spiritual traditions often tried to escape the body. Modern culture often worships the body while emptying it of meaning. Tantra proposes something more difficult. It says the body is not an obstacle to spirit. The body is one of the places where spirit becomes visible. The body can become temple. But a temple is not sacred because anything happens there. It is sacred because what happens there is governed by reverence. This is also why tantric sexuality cannot honestly be reduced to technique. The modern market loves techniques. It loves hacks, methods, secrets, and shortcuts. It can sell tantra as better orgasms, longer sex, or more intense chemistry. But that misses the essence. In serious tantra, what matters is not merely what the body does. It is the consciousness brought to it. The same outward act may be mechanical in one setting and sacred in another. The difference is intention, awareness, discipline, and the moral quality of the relation. And that brings us to another important point. Tantra is not hedonism in spiritual clothing. It is not simply indulgence decorated with incense and Sanskrit words. In fact, one could say Tantra is a critique of both repression and excess. It does not tell human beings to deny desire as though desire were dirty, but it also does not tell them to obey desire blindly as though intensity were truth. It says instead that desire must be observed, contained, refined, and elevated. That is where the idea of sexual energy comes in. Much has been exaggerated and mythologized about this, especially in modern popular culture, but the basic insight is serious. Sexual energy is not merely a biological urge. It is a form of vitality, a concentration of life force. In most people, it is scattered quickly. Tantra asks whether that force can be held, expanded, and transmuted into greater clarity, intimacy, devotion, and awareness. In that sense, the erotic becomes not just an appetite, but a laboratory of consciousness. Tantric sexuality also speaks to a deep modern wound. Many people today are sexually active, but relationally fragmented. They may know stimulation, but not intimacy. They may know fantasy, but not presence. They may know desire, but not reverence. This is one reason the idea of Tantra has such appeal in modern times. Beneath all the commercialization, there is a genuine hunger there. People sense that sex stripped of depth can become empty, and they look for a way to reunite body, heart, and spirit. Yet this hunger has also made Tantra vulnerable to corruption. Wherever spirituality and sexuality meet, there is danger. False teachers can easily exploit longing, vulnerability, and the language of sacred energy. Individuals can use tantric ideas to justify narcissism, infidelity, manipulation, or self-deception. So any serious discussion of tantric sexuality must insist on ethics. Consent is necessary, but not sufficient. There must also be honesty, reciprocity, maturity, and responsibility. Sacred sexuality without moral seriousness is not sacred at all. Perhaps the most profound form of tantric sexuality is not found in novelty, but in depth. Not in endless experimentation, but in conscious partnership. In a long relationship, tantric principles can transform sexuality from a repetitive act into a living practice of mutual awakening. Eye contact, breath, patience, polarity, trust, emotional truth, and reverence can all deepen over time. In that sense, Tantra is not fundamentally about exoticism. It is about learning how not to become unconscious in the presence of the most powerful human energies. So, what is tantric sexuality finally? It is the refusal to believe that sexuality must remain either shameful or superficial. It is the claim that desire, far from being merely animal, may contain the raw material of transcendence. It is the attempt to bring awareness into arousal, reverence into touch, and spiritual meaning into embodied union. At its lowest level, sex can be a reflex. At its highest level, it can become a form of communion. Tantra lives in that difference. It asks whether the erotic can become not an escape from consciousness, but an intensification of it, and that is why the subject endures. Because behind all human desire, there is a deeper longing, not merely to feel pleasure, but to overcome separation, to enter wholeness, and to experience union without losing awareness. That is the true promise of tantric sexuality. Not simply better sex, but deeper being.